Hey everybody. In this episode, I keep things pretty short and sweet. I have one listener question. The question is from somebody who is wondering about how they should treat interacting with their ex from over a decade ago, but circumstances are different now and they're married. So we talk about boundaries in a relationship, communication, all sorts of things like that. If you would like to send in a question for the show to be considered for a future episode, please don't forget you can email me at duffthepsych@gmail.com, or you can go to duffthepsych.com and use the contact form there. All right, let's go. This is the Hardcore Self-Help Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Duff. I'm a clinical psychologist and a self-help author from Southern California. My goal is to make mental health content for real people, just like you. And in this show, I answer your questions or dive deep into topics related to life, psychology, mental health, relationships, and more. Please be aware that sometimes I use some spicy language, and I also don't shy away from sensitive topics, but I will try to give you a content warning whenever it's relevant. So if all this sounds good to you, let's get started. All right. Hello, friends of all varieties. This is episode 387. Thank you for joining me. I have a relatively short and sweet episode today. I'm just going to be doing one question here. Your boy is tired this week. It's been a very busy week, and I had to do some, meetings and actually some brave stuff today. I talked with my employer about some important stuff, which took a little bit of emotional lead up and all of that. So I think that took it out of me a little bit, and I've just been kind of running at a fast pace. So I am going to take the opportunity to go easy on myself and, take one question instead of two. I know you guys don't mind whenever I do that. Sometimes you guys prefer it because, short and sweet can be a good thing. I have mentioned this before, but I have been using ChatGPT, the AI program, more and more to help me prep for things. And today was no exception. I was kind of proposing some changes to things happening at work. And with the help of ChatGPT, I was able to sort of generate a document outlining the proposal that I had. And then once I wrote something up, I was able to upload it to ChatGPT, and it gave me, or I asked for feedback about it, as well as anticipated roadblocks or things that may come up that could be points of contention or things like that, so that I could develop, sort of rebuttals or rationale for those things. And then the coolest part is, as you add all those things in, they stay within the chat, and I was able to then reference them later. And then today I was using my headphones and using the voice chat feature for ChatGPT and asking it to run me through sort of a mock meeting and then give me feedback at the end of that. So if you are somebody who is, going to be having interviews for school or internship or potential jobs, if you are wanting to practice socializing or dating, these are all circumstances where I think you could really benefit from using, any of these programs. But, I'm most familiar with ChatGPT. A lot of these features would be more relevant in the paid version than the free one, but I'm sure you can do a lot there as well. I just think it's a really underutilized resource for kind of preparation for things. Just wanted to share that. I know I talk about this stuff all the time, but I'm always trying to share, little tidbits that can make your life easier. But with all that said, let's go ahead and just jump into the question for today. Here it goes. It reads, I can't stop thinking about an ex, even though it's been over a decade and I'm very happily married. I'm also not sure if I want to stop thinking about this person or be friends with them. We dated for a few years in my early 20s, including living together for a year. Although there was some lying on his part and multiple breakups, I really feel like he was my best friend during that time. I think that because I was still very much forming as a human at this time, and it was a long and deep and intense relationship. He's kind of baked into me in a sense. We recently reconnected online after a decade of not speaking. It's been very casual, little friendly messages back and forth. But since the breakup, and especially since reestablishing connection, I think about him a lot. I want to talk to him more than we do. I have a wonderful life, and I don't for a second want to be in a romantic relationship with him again. We just were not compatible in that way for many reasons. But part of me must really miss having him in my life in some way. Maybe. Or should I just try to stop thinking about him altogether? And if so, how do I do that? It's been 10 plus years. I feel stuck. So thank you. This is a very good question, and it's an interesting one. I think there are a few things to dive into here. First off, I think it's quite normal for you to continue thinking about somebody frequently, even years after you've broken up with them or you go your separate ways in some capacity. For you, I think that you made a really good point that he was present for an especially pivotal time in your personal development. You said you were still developing as a person and you had a very deep relationship at that time. So this, inherently changes the way in which he knows you. And I imagine it means that he knows a version of you that many others have not gotten to know. And there's a unique appeal to that, somebody who really sees you in a certain way. So I think that there are a few relevant questions here. The first one would be what the boundaries of your marriage are. You said that you're happily married and that you're not looking for a romantic relationship with your ex, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a close relationship with him would be within the bounds of your relationship agreement. When I say that, I've used the term relationship agreement before, and in some cases, these are rules and boundaries that are explicitly talked about, like an actual agreement, but often they are unsaid. Sometimes they're just norms and boundaries that come to be within a relationship, and they don't need to be necessarily strictly defined, but they're at least clear. Now, I'm always a fan of defining them more clearly because when you don't talk explicitly about the boundaries in your relationship, that leaves a lot of room for assumptions and misinterpretations. For example, in this case, you may feel like having a casual, friendly conversation with this ex is totally kosher, and it wouldn't even be something you need to tell your spouse about because it just seems normal to you. However, if you haven't talked about it, your spouse could feel totally differently, right? They might feel like this is a betrayal or something that you're hiding from them. They might feel like it's totally inappropriate for you to continue having contact ongoing with somebody that you were so close to before you got married. And now here you are married to this other person. To be clear, I'm not saying that this is how your spouse should feel about things. But if you haven't discussed the topic and if you haven't discussed these circumstances, or at least others like it, if there have been any other situations that could be similar, then you simply just don't know. Right? You need to be able to actually address these things and talk about them. Only you know the history that you have with this person, and only you know the extent to which your spouse understands what your ex has meant to you in the past or means to you now. So this is really something that's personal and something that you will need to think about. But I would ask that you also turn the tables and imagine that your spouse had somebody that they had a long and deep relationship with. Not only that, but in this relationship in the past, it involved the other person hurting them in some capacity. And they haven't talked in years, so you haven't really given it a second thought. But then you find out that they've actually been chatting again online. How does that sit with you? Maybe you actually need to take a moment and, pause, close your eyes, listen, and imagine that happening. Again, I'm not trying to lead you here. I don't know how you should feel. Maybe you would be happy for them to be speaking again. Maybe you would be really glad that your spouse has somebody that understands them well, as long as your marriage isn't threatened. But you may also feel a deep sense of threat or insecurity for whatever reason, right? I would say that the best way to make sure that this doesn't become something that gets in between you and your spouse would be to try to talk about it, as I said, and broach the subject in a matter-of-fact way. I think that you could do this because you're kind of already doing it here in the question that you wrote in. I don't think it'll be too much of a problem to bring it up in person, with your spouse. But for example, you might say something like, "Hey, babe, you know who Jake is, right?" Jake's just an arbitrary name, right? "Hey, babe, you know who Jake is, right? I used to date him before, and, we lived together for a while. And we had, really intense relationship at that time. I've told you about that. I haven't talked to him in a long time, like years and years, but he recently popped up on social media and we've been sharing a few messages back and forth, just friendly stuff, nothing serious. But I wanted to bring it up because we haven't really encountered a situation like this, you and I, before, and I just wanted to know how you feel about it. There's nothing romantic going on, nothing flirtatious going on. I really don't feel that way about him. and I'm very happy with us and our marriage. But, we were really good friends during that tough time in my life. And I feel like it would be good to have him as a friend, but I just want to talk with you about it because I don't want anything to be under the table. So what are your thoughts? Right? This would be sort of a very open-ended way of bringing it up. And I can't predict how your spouse would react or where the conversation would go from there. But approaching it in this way would be very honest, and it would also show respect in that, you wanted to clarify any feelings or boundaries that are necessary before you inadvertently cause harm, because that's not your intention. If your spouse is vehemently opposed to the idea, if they are like, no, that's horrible, I don't want that, that's a betrayal, etc., then, you'll have to go from there. You'll have to decide how you would like to treat that. Maybe it remains important to you that you are allowed to have friends that are close and intimate outside of your marriage. And this is something you need to consider negotiating with your spouse. Or maybe it's just the case that your spouse's discomfort is sort of a wake-up call and you think, okay, yeah, this is probably the last thing that I want. This is the final nudge that you need to move on and cut off contact, right? So those are some ideas. I want to bring up a few more potential concerns, but really quick, let's take a break and talk about today's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Chomps. Every so often, I get a sponsor on the podcast that sends product over for me to try, and I'm left immediately wanting more. And that is Chomps for me. I've said it before, but Chomps, if you're listening, hook me up. One of my personal biggest vices is snacking. And I don't mean, a vice in the moral sense, but for me, my own personal health, this is the habit that gets me into the most trouble. But when I'm up late after everybody else has gone to bed and I'm still working, it's just really hard to pretend like there aren't all sorts of snacks and goodies that I could get into while I'm working on stuff. So for me, it's helpful to have alternatives, healthier things that I can eat that are still satisfying but aren't going to be as detrimental. And that's where Chomps comes in. Chomps, simply put, are meat sticks, but they aren't like the mystery meat that you find near the counter at the gas station. They have 0 sugar, up to 12 grams of protein, and they're made from high-quality, sustainably sourced meat. Their ingredient lists are very small, which is a good thing, and you can see exactly what's in there. They come in 9 different varieties. I'm a fan of the taco flavor, the beef one, but they have all sorts of different types, including beef, turkey, and even venison, and they're all tasty. Right now, Chomps is offering you guys, the listeners, 20% off your first order and free shipping when you go to chomps.com/duff. So head over there to chomps.com/duff, see all the delicious flavors, and get 20% off your first order and free shipping. That's chomps.com/duff. Okay, like I said, a few other potential concerns here. First off, just because you say that you don't have any romantic feelings toward him doesn't mean that he doesn't have any toward you, even if he doesn't give off that impression. Obviously, you know this person better than I do, and in the past you knew him quite well, but I do need to point out the fact that you mentioned in your question that there was lying on his part in your relationship with him. People can certainly change, and the context here is different, but if this means that he was unfaithful toward you in the past or lied about really important things, you may want to be cautious of that tendency also being here in the present. There's also a phenomenon that I would probably call drift in relationships, and it's pretty common, but it's where things start off very casual and friendly with no intention of becoming romantic or sexual, but over time they simply start to bit by bit drift that way. This is really common in the workplace when people have that sort of work wife or work husband thing that occurs where, it doesn't start off that way. It's just sort of casual coworker stuff, very friendly, very, normal. But then bit by bit, the boundaries loosen up until somewhere down the line, it becomes apparent that, hey, now it's a bit of an inappropriate relationship, or in some cases, even more, that proximity, that tendency to see each other every day, that might lead to things like an affair or something like that. And in this situation, I could see that playing out similarly. Maybe you're just reacting to photos on Instagram, right? Or asking little innocuous questions about each other's lives, stuff like, oh, where are you working now? Oh, that's cool, stuff like that. But, maybe one day you're starting to react to each other's pictures, and then, you post something that's like a little bit more, nice looking or revealing, and you get a fire emoji, reaction on a picture of yours, and you go, oh, well, that's nice. It kind of makes you smirk. It's like, I remember that attention. Maybe you get into a pattern of a little more playful and teasing with each other, since that's something that friends do. But then you find yourself, leaning into that a little bit more and bridging over into maybe being a little bit flirtatious, and maybe you're checking your messages more and kind of waiting for the next response, but you're trying to be not so obvious about it because, you don't want to rouse any suspicion. It's innocuous, but also you don't necessarily want to put it out on Front Street. And then maybe in the next week you see he posted something about a place that you used to go together, and that brings up a memory for you. And so you share that. You say, hey, remember when we were there at that place? And then he goes, yeah, of course I do. And then asks, hey, do you still have that dress that you wore? And you go, oh my God, you remember that dress? And he says, of course I do. Are you kidding? And then on and on and on until it can get a bit risky, right? I hope that's not too dramatic of a depiction. I just want you to understand how these things can happen. Even if you go into it thinking a certain thing, drift does occur. And I just want you to be super honest with yourself and reflect on, what you would gain from having some capacity of a relationship with this person versus anything that you may potentially be risking by inviting him back into your life. Let's say that you do want to have a relationship. You do want to continue having some kind of friendship with your ex. Not only do I think you should talk with your spouse, as we've mentioned already, but you may also want to talk with your ex and explain your own boundaries here. So this would be something like, hey, I wanted you to know, I told my husband that we've been talking here and there because I miss you. I think it's great to talk again. I'd love to be friends still and talk more, but I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page, right? I'm married and I just want to be friends at this stage in our lives. Is that cool with you, regardless of everything that's happened in the past, right? So just sort of putting it forward and getting the buy-in from your ex as well as your spouse so that everybody is on the same page here. Now, if it's time to move on, if it is time to stop thinking about this person so much and stop entertaining the idea of having them in your life still, I think part of the puzzle is simply giving yourself that permission, giving yourself permission to move on, right? Knowing that the door is closed, that you will not be having any sort of substantive relationship with this person, that may help you feel a sense of closure that you didn't have before because, there was always that window of, you could still potentially be friends. Maybe you'll reconnect in the future, what have you. In terms of thinking about him often, that I don't think is really a problem in and of itself. As I said at the beginning, it's not unusual for you to think about somebody that was so central to an important part of your life. If you find, though, that you're yearning for this person rather than just thinking about them from time to time, that could definitely be something to explore. What is it that you are wanting? What is it that you might be missing? Is it a type of support and companionship that you don't have right now? Is it just having a friend? Is it the types of things that you guys used to do together? And identifying those may help you recognize that there are other ways, other sources of filling these voids in your life that are rich and exciting and can live within the boundaries of your relationship, whereas this other relationship maybe can't. If it's painful for you to see him online without being able to interact, that's also something to consider. We all like to think that we can be friends with people that we've dated in the past or people that we've been married to even. And maybe we can continue seeing them in person or online and it won't really be an issue. Usually we say something to the effect of, we can be adults about it. We don't have to go no contact. We can be adults. And in practice, this is way harder than it sounds in theory. It's way harder to come to a place of acceptance and moving on when you are still able to see their online or in-person presence and sometimes even interact with them. You would absolutely need to feel this out for yourself, but it could be that going no contact again and removing your connections to him online would be the best way to help yourself move on. Only you can say that for yourself. But one thing you may want to consider is, right, that yearning that I talked about. One thing that I talk about with a lot of my therapy patients, something that I've been covering recently, is the importance of recognizing when you have an urge and honoring that urge, but not necessarily taking the exact action that the urge wants you to do. So as an example, right now, I'm working with somebody that is in essentially a roommate type situation with their spouse, Their spouse has been clear that they care about them, but they're not in love with them anymore. They don't have a desire to be close. They're just not really in a marriage anymore. It's just sort of like cohabitating. And this person, the person that I work with, often has the urge to go share information about their day or share something interesting that they learned or just, share some sort of excitement. But this continually gets them shut down by their spouse, and then they feel sad about it. So one thing that we've worked on instead is recognizing when that urge is there and respecting the fact that there is an urge. They want to do something about it. They feel inspired in some sort of way. But instead of going and trying that well-worn path of interacting with their spouse and getting shut down, they can instead redirect that energy in another way, right? Not pretend like nothing's happening, but make a different choice about what to do with that. For you, in this situation with your ex, a similar approach could be helpful, right? You feel the urge to reach out to them. You feel the urge to check in. Cool. Totally a valid urge. That's okay. But maybe we don't want to follow through with that urge and perform that action of checking in with them or reaching out. So how can we redirect that energy in a different way? This could be trying to fill that same need, but in a different way. So if you, for instance, wish that you could have somebody to reminisce about the old times with, maybe you have a different and safer friend that you could hit up on social media or give a call to. If you want someone to listen to you while you vent about the world, could you maybe ask your spouse or somebody else close to you to just sit and listen for a while you bitch about the world and dump on them for a little bit? It doesn't even have to be actually related to the original urge, the action that you take. Maybe when you catch yourself with that urge to reach out, instead of trying to find a direct substitute for that feeling, maybe you can just recognize that, okay, it's time to get offline. It's time to go find something that I can do to take good care of myself. Maybe that's a walk. Maybe that's playing with my dog. Maybe that's going and having a lunch with my spouse. Whatever it might be, just doing something to honor the fact that you had that urge in the first place. So yeah, to wrap up my response here, there's no perfect answer as to what you should do here. There are a lot of layers to this and also personal information and context that I'm just not privy to. I think the first step is to consider how this fits into your relationship boundaries. If those need to be clarified, then do that. If you do want to pursue a relationship with your ex and it's okay within your marriage, then the next step is being brutally honest with yourself about why you want that and being aware of the potential hazards that could be there. And if you decide that it's best to not have a relationship with him of any kind, then the advice that I just gave before this would be the most applicable. Just want to reassure you though, right now you haven't done anything wrong. You're not crazy for feeling stuck on this person and still thinking about him years down the line. But you writing in this question, I think, is significant, and you probably recognize the need right now to clarify things at this point in your life. You're not writing in for no reason, so whichever way this goes, it seems like you need to clarify that and figure that out right now before it gets too confusing for you or uncomfortable. So best of luck to you and take care. And everybody listening, thank you very much. If you want the full show notes, go to deafthepsych.com/episode 387. Thank you so much for joining me in this episode. If you would like to send a question or a topic for a future episode, please email me at deafthepsych@gmail.com. If you like my approach and would like to learn more about my books, online course, or other resources, please head over to my website at deafthepsych.com. And lastly, it would mean so much to me if you would leave a review for the podcast wherever you listen to it, or share an episode with a friend. Until next time, you got this.